G'day and welcome to the first episode of Apache Metadata and Security. Today we are going to show you how to get Apache up and running. So we will first cover off the basics of what Apache Ranger is and where you can find more information about it. We'll then show you how to set this up on your own machine so you can have a play with it and go through some of the general uses and the overall interface. In later episodes, we'll go into how we can actually manage policies and using the API, and then further in this series as well, we plan on going through how you can customize and extend these services. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you where you can find more information on this. So the first place to go if you want more information around Apache Ranger is to their actual website, and that's ranger.apache.org. So I've got it up in front of me now, but you can find most of your information here, including a wiki and quick start guide and stuff like that as well. Some important things to note here is that they've also got the REST API documentation, and we'll be referring to this a lot later as well. But this is quite an important use, or quite an important tool for you as we go through these series as well. The second place to go is in the description, and that is my actual GitHub repo that contains the Docker images. There's two ways of doing this, and the first one is that we actually can use GitHub, and I have pre-built images here. You can see some of them are currently building at the moment. But we have some pre-built images here in the Apache Ranger directory, but we also have the Docker files, so you can build this yourself. We've got some submodules of the actual repo, so if you want to use a different version of Ranger and you want to test specific things, we're currently working on the snapshot version, so 2.1.0. But if you wanted to change that to be a particular version of Ranger, so for example, if you wanted it to work on either version 1 or version 2, the release version, feel free, and there are documentation steps in here as well as to how you can update and rebuild this using whatever version you want. So this is probably the second place to get information for, obviously Google and whatnot afterwards. But we're going to quickly run through now how you would go about setting this up and running this locally. So how the setup would work is let me just go into directory. I think I have an AMS directory. Yeah, I do. All right, cool. So the first thing you're going to do is clone the repo that we showed you just before. One thing to be careful about, though, is that we have submodules in here. So when you clone, you want to include this extra flag called recursive. So we'll put the command on screen for you now. But the command is just the same as you ordinarily would, which is git clone. We're going to give it the repository URL, which is my spider-naz/docker images, but then you also want the recursive here, and what this will do is also clone in any of the submodules as well, so you'll get the source code for Ranger and the source code for Atlas in there as well. Of course, if you don't care about the actual source code, so if you don't plan on building these images locally and you only want to use the Docker Hub images, then you won't need to use the recursive flag. Cool. So what have we actually got then? So in Apache Ranger, we have a few things here. The first thing is we have the build script, and the build script is how you guys are going to be building this locally if it's something that you're after. Primarily the main things that we're interested in at the moment are going to be the user sync, tag sync, and the admin tool. And that's the binaries that we'll copy across. Warning, building these images from scratch will take a long time. We are building essentially all of it from source, and once you've built this and you've actually packaged it, then we'll be copying across and building that Docker image as well. Awesome. And then the second thing is, let's just quickly run through the actual Docker file that we've built. So the one that we're using at the moment, if you're using the cloud version, is the prepackaged and pre-built Ranger 2.1.0 snapshot version, and you can see that by the URL here. So I've built it and put it into my releases in GitHub. Alternatively, if you have done the recursive download and you do have the source code and you wanted to build it yourself, and you get this folder called binaries here with the built source code or the packaged source code, you can use the local one as well to build your own local image, and this, instead of downloading it from the web, is just copying the binaries in from your directory. Just be careful that if this is something that you want to do or want to update yourself, that you update the version in here as well as whatever you are downloading it for. Awesome. So how do you get this up and running? So Ranger is the policy tool for Hadoop, and we want to be able to get this up and running to test and play with the interface, to get to know it, to try certain things, and then eventually what we're doing later in the series is how do we extend that for other applications. So for example, a web application. So we have a Docker file for you just here, and this is pulling in the latest versions. You can also pull the experimental if you want to see some of the latest changes. Currently the latest version is running on snapshot anyway, but we'll probably change that as releases come in from the Apache community. And you can see that there are two images here. So what do each of these things do? As it probably makes sense here, the first one here is RangerDB, and that is a backend database that holds a lot of the configuration and a lot of the setting and the policies for Apache Ranger. The second image is the actual Ranger admin tool, and so this is the actual admin tool that you'd want to use and you'd want to run. And we're going to be running this on port 6080, and so that's the interface that you're going to go to. And that's the standard one that's also published on any sort of Cloudera cluster as well. So it should be exactly like it would be in production, at least from an access perspective. The only exception being, of course, that we're using just local passwords and usernames and passwords, which you will not be using in production. Cool. So how can we run this? So there are two different ways that we can end up running this. And we'll just jump across. You can find this in the documentation as well. So if you go into the Apache Ranger stuff, you can run this locally without using a Docker Compose file if you use the network host, and you then name your images so that they can find each other. While this does work, and I have tested this, I don't recommend it. I actually much prefer to be using a Docker Compose file, and this is so that networks can be built, you can run multiple different networks, etc. But this also then lets you tear up and spin up and tear down your containers in one command for multiple different things. And the other thing that you want to be able to do is you want to be able to remove anything that becomes redundant later on as well. So there's a remove orphans option within Docker Compose as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump into where I've downloaded this repo before, and you can see that we have these Docker Compose files here. And we want to use the Ranger one. So if we go Docker Compose, and we want to, sorry, Siri's just popping up on the screen. We want to use the Ranger version, and we want to bring this up. So this should download it and build the images. I have them downloaded locally already. And you can see that first and foremost, we're starting off with building out the database, which is the dependent service. And we have a loop that actually exists within the Ranger admin tool. If I can see it pop up at some point. But there's a loop in the admin tool which checks to make sure that the database is ready to access. Otherwise, it just sort of sits there in a loop. Let's show you that anyway. So Ranger admin tool. Here we go. So we will try and connect to that RangerDB service. So it's important that if you're building this without using Docker Compose as well, you set the name to RangerDB. Otherwise, this will just sit here endlessly in a loop. Awesome. So as it spins up, it'll do its initial configuration. So this only happens on first spin up. If you stop and restart these containers, it should be fine. There are some known issues with logging, but we don't have logging turned on for this one at the moment, and we'll go to that throughout the series as well. What I'm going to do though is I'm just going to hit pause here, and I will come back to you when the services have started. Awesome. So as you can see, it is now being completed, and we've got finished setup based on user authentication method none. So that's all good. What will happen now is if you just jump into here, and the UI is now being refreshed based on that new image upload, you can now see that we're in Ranger. There are some significant change, or minor changes. I mean, it's significant in the grand scheme of things, but some minor changes, including the UI. It's now blue instead of green. Go plan error. But you also have this other part here, which is security zone as well. So this is a new thing that's coming to the updates and the snapshots of version 2.1.0. Cool. As we mentioned before, audit won't work. We've actually configured the audit to be none at the moment. So you'll see this little error message up here saying loading failed. That's normal. Well, expected. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through some of the things that you may have here. So obviously the default services, and throughout the series we're going to extend this and add services here. So we'll add a HTTP service eventually, and what we want to be able to do later in the series is actually to be doing tag-based policies as well. And this should hook up to our metadata tool, Apache Atlas. So Apache Atlas can store metadata about what the object is, and we can do a lookup on that and actually grant or deny privileges based on that. So thank you for sticking by for this first episode, and look forward to more to come. Have a great day. Bye.